The small, translucent bottle felt cool and familiar in Captain David Sharma's gnarled fingers. 72 years of life, 40 of them in service to his country, had left their marks. A slight tremor in his hands, a network of fine lines around his kind eyes, and the unwelcome companion of glaucoma, a silent thief trying to steal the vibrant hues of the world he cherished. These drops, meticulously administered 3 times a day, were his defense, his daily ritual to keep the encroaching shadows at bay. He tilted his head back in his worn armchair, the late afternoon sun slanting through the window of his small, tidy apartment in the Willows Creek condominium complex. 1 drop in the left eye, 1 drop in the right. But the sensation that followed the first drop was not the usual mild, fleeting sting. It was a searing, instantaneous agony, a fire igniting in his left eye, so intense it ripped a choked gasp from his chest. His eyelid clamped shut, fused by a terrifying, sticky viscosity. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. He fumbled for the bottle, his other eye blinking rapidly, trying to clear the sudden blur that wasn't just tears. Something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. He tried to pry his eyelid open, but it was stuck fast, a horrifying, unnatural adhesion. The burning intensified, spreading a chemical inferno behind his sealed lid. A wave of nausea washed over him. He stumbled to his feet, knocking over the side table, the familiar routine of his life shattering, along with the clatter of his reading glasses and a half-finished cup of tea. Anya. He managed to cry out, his voice raspy with pain and fear, though he knew his daughter wasn't due to visit until later that evening. He was alone with this unbearable, inexplicable agony. His hands slick with tears, and some other thicker substance found the phone. His fingers, usually so adept at navigating its buttons, even with his compromised vision, fumbled, shaking. He could barely see the numbers through his one streaming, pain-filled right eye. He stabbed at the screen, hoping he was hitting Anya's speed dial. When I answered, his voice was barely a whisper, stretched thin with a terror I hadn't heard since a crackly battlefield recording he'd once reluctantly shared. Anya. My eye. Burns. Can't open. I was 2 blocks away, stuck in traffic after a grueling day at the FDA regional office, a day spent wading through compliance reports for a new diabetes drug. Dad, what's wrong? What happened? The drops. Anya, the drops. Then the line went dead. A cold dread, sharper than any professional concern I'd ever felt, seized me. My father, Captain David Sharma, a man who had faced down enemy fire without flinching, sounded utterly undone. I wrenched the car into a U-turn horn blaring, ignoring the indignant shouts of other drivers. The Willows Creek complex was only minutes away, but each second stretched into an eternity. I found him on the floor of his living room, curled on his side, his breath coming in ragged sobs. His left eye was swollen shut, a grotesque, angry red, with a pale, glue-like substance matting the lashes, sealing the lid. The small eye drop bottle lay beside him, its distinctive green cap askew. The acrid chemical smell in the room was faint, but unmistakable to my trained nose. It wasn't the sterile medicinal scent of his timolol solution. It was something else. Something terribly, horribly familiar from my work with misbranded adhesives and dangerous craft supplies, cyanoacrylate, superglue. Dad. I knelt beside him, my mind reeling, trying to reconcile the scene with the mundane reality of my father's quiet life. Oh my God. Dad, what happened? He could only moan, his hand flailing towards his eye. My FDA training kicked in a cold layer of professional focus, encasing the frantic terror of a daughter. Assess, secure, preserve. I grabbed the eye drop bottle, careful not to smudge any potential fingerprints, my gaze automatically noting the lot number, the expiration date. It looked like his usual prescription, but the smell. I'm calling 911, Dad. Don't touch your eye. Just breathe. My voice was calmer than I felt the practiced tone of an enforcement officer taking control of a scene. Inside, I was screaming. Who would do this? Who could commit such a monstrous, sadistic act against a gentle, elderly man? The paramedics were quick, efficient. They assessed his vitals, their faces grim as they examined his eye. The ER doctor they radioed ahead gave instructions for an immediate saline flush, but the damage they warned could be severe. As they wheeled him out, I saw the small, meticulously kept calendar on his kitchen wall. Today's date was circled. Below it in his neat hand, HOA meeting, 7 p.m., re-porch flag. A chill snaked down my spine. Karen Albright, president of the Willows Creek HOA. A woman whose petty tyrannies and obsessive enforcement of arbitrary rules had been a constant source of low-grade irritation for my father and for many other residents. She'd been particularly incensed about the small, respectfully displayed Marine Corps flag on his porch, claiming it violated some obscure bylaw about non-approved external decorations. My father, a man who had sacrificed so much under that flag, had politely but firmly refused to remove it. Could she? No. It was too monstrous, too unthinkable. But as I followed the ambulance, the tampered eye drop bottle, sealed in an evidence bag, I instinctively grabbed from my work kit in the car. A cold, hard certainty began to form in my gut. This wasn't a random accident. This was an attack. And my job, my life's work, at the Food and Drug Administration, investigating adulterated products and chemical assaults, had just crashed into my personal life with the force of a battering ram. The emergency room at County General was a blur of urgent activity. Dr. Ramirez, the on-call ophthalmologist, was a young woman with calm eyes and deft hands. She worked quickly, applying anesthetic drops to his uninjured right eye to allow examination, then beginning the painstaking process of trying to irrigate and separate the fused lids of his left. The superglue had adhered with vicious tenacity. "The cornea is almost certainly chemically burned," Dr. Ramirez said, her voice low and serious, as she peered through her ophthalmoscope. "The extent of the damage, we won't know until we can get the lids open and properly visualize the interior chamber. This was not accidental." Her gaze met mine, questioning. "No," I said, my voice tight. "It was deliberate. The substance in his eye drops was replaced. I believe it was cyanoacrylate." She nodded slowly. "That would fit the presentation. The fumes alone can cause severe irritation, direct contact, catastrophic." She paused. "He's lucky he only instilled it in one eye." "The bottle, do you have it?" "Yes." "Secured. I'm an FDA Enforcement Officer. I'll be sending it to our labs for analysis first thing in the morning." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Good. That will be crucial. For now, our priority is minimizing further damage and managing his pain." My father, drifting in and out of a pained, morphine-induced haze, occasionally mumbled his words disjointed. "The flag," she said. "An eyesore. Karen Albright." The name hammered in my mind. I spent the night in a stiff chair beside his hospital bed, the rhythmic beep of the monitors, a grim soundtrack. My father's face, even in sleep, was etched with pain. His bandaged left eye was a stark white blotch against his usually ruddy skin. My anger, a cold, controlled fury, solidified into resolve. I would find out who did this, and I would bring the full force of the law and the FDA down on them. My daily life until yesterday had been a predictable rhythm of work and family. As a field agent for the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations, my days were usually spent conducting inspections at pharmaceutical plants, investigating counterfeit drug rings, or tracking down sources of contaminated food products. It was demanding work, often frustrating, but deeply satisfying. I believed in the FDA's mission to protect the public health. I had seen firsthand the devastating consequences of adulterated medicines and dangerous products. I knew the science, the regulations, the legal framework. My apartment was filled with chemistry textbooks and regulatory manuals, a testament to a career I was passionate about. My father, David Sharma, was the anchor of my life. A widower since I was a teenager, he was a man of quiet strength and unshakable integrity. After retiring as a captain from the Marines, he'd settled into a modest life, finding solace in his books, his small garden, and his weekly chess games with old service buddies. His glaucoma was a frustration, a daily reminder of his body's betrayals, but he faced it with the same stoic courage he'd shown throughout his life. He lived independently in the Willows Creek complex, a sprawling collection of low-rise condos, marketed as active senior living, though its HOA, under Karen Albright, often seemed more focused on enforcing draconian rules than on fostering community. Karen Albright. I'd only met her a few times during visits to my dad. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed, with a helmet of lacquered blonde hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing, cataloging every perceived infraction. She exuded an aura of self-importance and a barely veiled contempt for anyone who didn't meet her exacting standards. My father, with his quiet pride and gentle non-confrontational nature, had nonetheless found himself in her crosshairs. There was the flag incident, of course. Then complaints about the clutter of his small herb pots on his porch, basil, rosemary, thyme, which she deemed unsightly. She'd even commented on the volume of his television, though he was partially deaf in one ear from his service days and always used headphones in the evenings. Each complaint was delivered via a sharply worded official HOA notice filled with references to obscure bylaws. My dad had mostly brushed them off, more bemused than bothered, but I sensed a growing undercurrent of malice from Albright. Now this monstrous act that transcended petty tyranny and entered the realm of criminal violence. The next morning, after a brief, reassuring conversation with a heavily sedated dad, I drove straight to the FDA's regional laboratory, the sealed evidence bag containing the eye drop bottle on the passenger seat beside me. Dr. Ben Carter, our lead forensic chemist, a man whose brilliance was matched only by his meticulousness, was already waiting for me. I'd called him before dawn. "Anya, terrible news about your father. How is he?" Ben's usual cheerful demeanor was subdued, his brow furrowed with concern. "He's stable, but his vision, we don't know yet." "Ben, I need this analyzed." Stat. Chain of custody is paramount. I handed him the bag and the signed evidence receipt. "I suspect cyanoacrylate." The odor was distinct. Ben nodded, examining the small bottle through the clear plastic. "We'll run full GC-MS HPLC, the works. We'll identify every compound in there. You suspect tampering, obviously." "I know it was tampered with, Ben, and I have a strong suspect. Karen Albright, his HOA president. There's a history of harassment. HOA disputes escalating to chemical assault. That's a new one. But people are capable of anything, I suppose." He looked at me, his expression serious. "Anya, if it is what you think it is, this isn't just adulteration of a drug product. This is aggravated assault, possibly with a chemical weapon, depending on how the DA wants to classify it. You'll need local PD heavily involved." "Already are," I said grimly. Detective Miller from County Robbery Homicide is the primary, but the FDA has a clear interest here. This is a pharmaceutical product, a scheduled prescription drug deliberately contaminated with a harmful chemical substance and administered to a vulnerable adult. That falls squarely within our jurisdiction for misbranding, adulteration, and product tampering with intent to cause injury. "Damn right it does," Ben said, his jaw tight. "I'll get this prioritized. You should have preliminary results by end of day." My next stop was the police station to meet with Detective Linda Miller, a sharp, no-nonsense investigator in her 40s. I laid out the situation, my father's condition, the history with Karen Albright, and my strong suspicions, backed by my professional assessment of the substance's likely nature. I also handed over a copy of the FDA evidence submission form for the eye drop bottle. Miller listened intently, taking copious notes. "Agent Sharma, your father's statement, when he's able to give one, will be crucial. Right now, Ms. Albright is just a person of interest based on a neighborhood dispute. We need more to link her directly to the tampering." "I understand, Detective," I said. "But this isn't just a dispute. My father is a veteran. He's elderly. He has a vision impairment. He was targeted in his own home with his own medication. Albright had opportunity. She's frequently in the complex. She had motive, a clear pattern of escalating animosity. The method, it's cowardly and vicious." I paused, trying to keep the raw emotion out of my voice. "I'll be looking into any FDA angles related to Ms. Albright's activities. If she's obtained or distributed any other misbranded or unapproved substances, for instance." Miller nodded. "Good. Let's keep each other informed. We'll send a patrol car to do a preliminary interview with Ms. Albright, get her initial reaction. See if she lawyers up. We'll also canvass your father's immediate neighbors, see if anyone saw anything unusual yesterday." The first rising action incident was, of course, the chemical assault itself, the horrific act that had put my father in the hospital fighting for his sight. The second began later that day. Detective Miller called me. "Agent Sharma, we just interviewed Karen Albright. She was a piece of work. Denied everything naturally. Said your father was probably senile and mixed up his medications himself. Claimed she was home all day yesterday, had a migraine. No witnesses to confirm her alibi yet. But here's the kicker. She immediately called her lawyer, and then an hour later filed a harassment complaint against you with our Internal Affairs Division, and another one with the HOA management company, claiming you're using your federal position to intimidate her because of legitimate HOA business concerning your father's rule violations." I felt a surge of cold anger. gaslighting, intimidation, trying to paint herself as the victim. Classic bully tactics. She's trying to discredit me to muddy the waters. Looks like it. Miller agreed. It also shows she's scared. Innocent people don't usually go on the offensive like that so quickly. Keep your head down on the personal front. Let us handle the direct investigation of her. You focus on your FDA angle. If she's dirty in one area, she might be dirty in others. My father was awake and lucid, though in considerable pain when I saw him that evening. His right eye, though unharmed, was bloodshot from strain and weeping. The left remained heavily bandaged. "Anya," he whispered, his hand finding mine. His grip was weak. That woman, Albright. She was at my door yesterday morning, complaining about the flag again, said she'd take care of it if I didn't. His breath hitched. I never thought. "It's okay, Dad," I said soothingly, though my heart was pounding. This was it. Albright had been there. She'd made a veiled threat. "Just rest. We'll take care of everything." He drifted off to sleep again. I sat there, the pieces clicking into place. Albright had the opportunity, she had the escalating motive, and now a direct threat. Ben Carter called me just as I was leaving the hospital. "Anya. Prelim results are in. It's exactly what you suspected. The primary component in those eye drops, apart from trace amounts of timolol malate, is ethyl 2-cyanoacrylate, commercial-grade superglue, and there are traces of a blue dye consistent with some craft store brands." "Thank you, Ben," I said, my voice grim. "That's the confirmation we needed. Send the full report to Detective Miller as soon as it's finalized, and to me, the concrete proof." Now the fight truly began. Karen Albright had escalated from a neighborhood nuisance to a dangerous criminal who had blinded my father with a chemical weapon. And she had no idea I had the full resources of the FDA and my own relentless determination coming for her. The days that followed were a grueling routine of hospital visits, consultations with ophthalmologists, and relentless investigative work. Dr. Ramirez and her team managed to surgically separate my father's eyelids, but the damage to his cornea was extensive. He had a severe chemical burn across the entire surface. His vision in that eye was reduced to light perception, and the prognosis was guarded. He would need multiple surgeries, including a potential corneal transplant down the line, and even then, full restoration of sight was unlikely. The pain was constant, managed with strong medication that left him groggy and disoriented. Each visit to his bedside, seeing him so vulnerable, so diminished, fueled my resolve. He in turn worried about me. "Anya, be careful," he'd whisper. "That woman, she's poison." "I will be, Dad," I'd assure him. "We're building a strong case. She won't get away with this." Karen Albright, meanwhile, was not idle. Her harassment complaint against me to my agency was quickly dismissed after I provided a full statement, and my supervisor, Maria Sanchez, vouched for my integrity and pointed out the clear conflict of interest Albright was attempting to manufacture. But within the Willows Creek HOA, Albright was waging a campaign of misinformation. She distributed a newsletter full of coded language about respecting community standards and dealing with problem residents who refused to comply with bylaws. She insinuated that my father was mentally incompetent, a danger to himself and others, and that I was using my government connections to bully a dedicated HOA volunteer. Some residents, the timid, or those who curried favor with her, seemed to buy into it. Others who had also felt the sting of her petty tyranny were more skeptical. A few even reached out to me discreetly, offering words of support, sharing their own stories of Albright's overreach. Old Mrs. Henderson from 2B, whose prize-winning roses Albright had once threatened to have removed for being overly ostentatious, called to say she'd seen Albright lurking near my father's porch the morning of the incident, looking like a cat stalking a bird. It wasn't enough to place the glue in her hand, but it chipped away at Albright's alibi. The next escalation. The third shocking incident in this rising tide of malice was an attempt at evidence tampering and further intimidation. My father, briefly discharged from the hospital to await specialized surgery, was staying with me at my apartment. His own condo was a crime scene, and emotionally, he couldn't bear to be there. One evening, my neighbor, a young lawyer named Mark, called me. "Anya, there's someone trying to get into your father's apartment back at Willows Creek. I got an alert from the complex security guard Rodriguez. He said a woman matching Albright's description was trying to convince him she needed to get in to check for a water leak that might affect other units. Rodriguez thought it was suspicious since your dad isn't there, and he called me because I'm listed as an emergency contact for your dad on the HOA files after you updated them. My blood ran cold. Did he let her in? No. He held firm, said he needed direct authorization from you or your father. She got angry, made a scene, then left. Rodriguez got her license plate as she drove off. It matches Albright's car. He also said she was carrying a small toolbox, which struck him as odd for just checking a leak. Albright was getting desperate. What was she trying to find, or plant, or remove? I immediately called Detective Miller. She's trying to obstruct the investigation, Miller. Maybe retrieve any other superglue she might have stashed or plant something to incriminate my dad. Miller cursed under her breath. We'll get a warrant for her apartment and her car based on this attempted unauthorized entry and potential evidence tampering. This woman is digging her own grave. The warrant was executed the next day. I wasn't present, but Miller called me with the results. They found several tubes of the exact brand of superglue, blue-dyed craft type, that Ben Carter's lab had identified from the eye drop bottle hidden in a kitchen drawer. They also found copies of my father's HOA file, with handwritten notes in the margins, expressing extreme animosity. Stubborn old fool refuses to comply, needs to be taught a lesson. And in her car, they found a pair of disposable gloves and a small, empty plastic dropper bottle, similar in size to an eye drop bottle tucked under the seat. The circumstantial evidence was piling up. This was also where the midpoint twist began to truly materialize, adding a new disturbing dimension to Karen Albright's crimes. While searching her computer and financial records, under the warrant, investigators stumbled upon something unexpected. Albright was receiving regular sizable payments from an offshore account, and her encrypted email correspondence revealed she was involved in a clandestine online business. She was illegally importing and selling unapproved cosmetic injectables, counterfeit Botox, unregulated dermal fillers, dangerous skin whitening creams, to a select clientele primarily within affluent, discreet social circles. She was using the HOA presidency as a cloak of respectability, her frequent deliveries and visitors explained away as HOA business or social calls. Suddenly, her extreme reaction to my father made a different, more sinister kind of sense. Had he seen something, a suspicious package, a clandestine meeting? Had he unknowingly become a threat to her lucrative illegal enterprise? The flag the porch herbs, were they just convenient pretexts for a deeper, more urgent need to silence or discredit him? Or had the stress of her illicit business, coupled with her personality, made her snap in such a depraved way when faced with his simple, principled defiance? This changes everything, Anya, Detective Miller said when she briefed me. She's not just a neighborhood bully with a cruel streak. She's running an illegal drug operation, endangering public health for profit. Your father's assault might have been an attempt to intimidate a potential witness, or simply a vicious lashing out by someone with a criminal mindset who felt her control slipping. My FDA instincts went on high alert. This was my domain: misbranded drugs, adulterated cosmetics, unapproved medical devices, illegal importation. This was a major public health risk. Miller. I said my agency needs to be formally involved in this side of the investigation. We have jurisdiction over the illegal importation and distribution of these products. We can track her suppliers, her customers. We can issue public warnings. This is big. The investigation now split into two parallel tracks: the violent assault on my father and Karen Albright's extensive criminal enterprise involving dangerous, unregulated substances. I threw myself into the FDA aspect, working with our Office of Criminal Investigations and our international partners to trace Albright's supply chain. It appeared she was sourcing these products from unregulated labs in Eastern Europe and Asia, then repackaging and selling them at a massive markup with no regard for sterility, purity, or potential side effects. We started identifying her customers, many of whom were horrified to learn what they had been injecting into their faces and bodies. The upcoming HOA meeting, originally called by concerned residents to demand answers about the assault on my father and to potentially oust Albright as president, now took on a far greater significance. It would be the perfect venue for a public reckoning, not just for her cruelty to my dad, but for her wider endangerment of the community and beyond. The tension in the days leading up to the meeting was palpable. Albright, out on bail for the assault charge, but clearly rattled by the search of her apartment, had retained a high-powered criminal defense attorney, a slick operator named Julian Vance, known for his aggressive tactics and his ability to get wealthy clients off on technicalities. Vance immediately went on the offensive, issuing statements decrying the witch hunt against his client, a respected community leader being persecuted by a federal agent with a personal vendetta. My father, meanwhile, underwent his first surgery, a procedure to repair some of the damage to his eyelid, and begin clearing the scar tissue from his cornea. It was partially successful, but his sight in that eye remained severely impaired. His spirits, however, were buoyed by the news of the widening investigation into Albright. "Get her, Anya," he'd said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Get her for all of it." The night of the HOA meeting, the community hall at Willows Creek was overflowing. Residents stood along the walls, their faces a mixture of anger, fear, and grim anticipation. Reporters from local news outlets alerted to the drama were present with cameras. My father, against medical advice but resolute, was there seated in a wheelchair in the front row, his bandaged eye a silent testament to Albright's brutality. I sat beside him not as an FDA agent in that moment, but as his daughter, his supporter. Detective Miller and 2 uniformed officers were also present ostensibly for security, but their presence added to the charged atmosphere. Karen Albright swept in flanked by Julian Vance and 2 junior lawyers from his firm. She attempted an air of cool composure, but her eyes darted nervously and a muscle twitched in her jaw. The remaining HOA board members, a timid treasurer named Arthur Finch, a flustered secretary Mrs. Gable, and a retired schoolteacher Eleanor Vance, no relation to the lawyer, thankfully, who had reluctantly stepped in as acting vice president, looked overwhelmed. Eleanor Vance. Her voice trembling slightly opened the meeting. "We are here tonight to address the serious allegations against our HOA president Karen Albright, including the assault on resident Captain David Sharma and other matters that have come to light concerning her conduct." Julian Vance was immediately on his feet. "This is an outrageous abuse of process. My client is the subject of an ongoing legal proceeding and should not be subjected to this public lynching. These allegations are baseless, politically motivated." Mr. Vance, Eleanor said surprisingly firm, "Your client is also the president of this association, and the residents have a right to know who they have entrusted with power. Please allow the discussion to proceed." Several residents then stood up to speak, their voices shaking, but clear, recounting their own experiences of Albright's bullying. Her arbitrary fines, her abuse of power. Mrs. Henderson described seeing Albright lurking near my father's apartment. The collective weight of their testimony painted a damning picture. Then it was my turn. I had been asked by several residents to speak not in my official FDA capacity initially, but as my father's daughter. I stood facing the crowd, then turned to look directly at Karen Albright. "Miss Albright," I began, my voice low but carrying through the hushed hall. "You know my father, Captain David Sharma, a man who served his country with honor for 40 years, a man who valued his independence, his quiet life, a man whose only offense in your eyes was displaying a small flag, a symbol of the service you clearly despise, and tending a few herbs on his porch." I paused, letting my words sink in. On May 15th, someone entered my father's apartment and replaced his vital glaucoma medication, his lifeline to sight, with industrial-grade superglue. A substance that, when instilled in his eye, caused excruciating pain, severe chemical burns, and has likely resulted in permanent vision loss. That someone, Miss Albright, we have compelling evidence to believe, was you. A gasp rippled through the room. Albright's face was pale, her composure cracking. Vance was about to object, but I held up a hand. "The evidence includes your presence at his apartment that morning, your veiled threats, the discovery of the same brand of superglue in your possession, and the trace evidence found in your car. The local police have charged you with aggravated assault and assault with a chemical agent." I took a breath. "But that, it turns out, is not the full extent of your depravity, Ms. Albright. Because while you were busy terrorizing elderly veterans and bullying your neighbors, you were also engaged in another far more insidious activity." This was the climax. I nodded to Detective Miller, who in turn signaled 2 plainclothes FDA agents who had been blending in with the crowd. They stepped forward, badges visible. "Karen Albright." I continued, my voice now carrying the full authority of my office. "The Food and Drug Administration, in conjunction with local law enforcement, has uncovered evidence that you have been operating an illegal enterprise, importing and distributing unapproved, misbranded, and adulterated cosmetic drugs and medical devices, counterfeit neurotoxins, unregulated dermal fillers, dangerous skin bleaching agents, products sourced from clandestine overseas labs sold by you to unsuspecting consumers, endangering their health and safety for your own profit." The FDA agents flanked Albright. One of them spoke, his voice firm and official. "Karen Albright, You are under arrest for multiple violations of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, including but not limited to the illegal importation and distribution of unapproved new drugs, misbranding, and adulteration. You are also facing federal charges related to wire fraud and money laundering in connection with this illicit enterprise. Albright stared speechless, her face a mask of disbelief turning to sheer terror. Julian Vance erupted, shouting about rights and due process, but it was drowned out by the shocked murmurs of the crowd. The carefully constructed world of Karen Albright, HOA tyrant and secret criminal, was imploding in spectacular fashion. As the FDA agents and local police escorted a now sobbing, sputtering Karen Albright out of the hall in handcuffs, a spontaneous burst of applause erupted. My father, watching from his wheelchair, slowly raised his uninjured hand and gave a single firm nod. Justice in its many forms was finally being served. The falling action began with Karen Albright's dramatic arrest. The combined weight of the state charges for the assault on my father and the new federal charges for her illegal pharmaceutical enterprise was crushing. Julian Vance, despite his bluster, found himself with very little room to maneuver. The evidence meticulously gathered by both the local PD and my FDA team was overwhelming. The superglue, the financial records, the testimony from her clients who had purchased the dangerous cosmetic products, the evidence from her suppliers, it painted an undeniable picture of a calculating, callous criminal. Albright spent several weeks in federal detention as the judge deemed her a flight risk and a danger to the community, denying bail despite Vance's strenuous objections. Her assets were frozen, pending the outcome of the trials. The Willows Creek HOA Board, with Eleanor Vance now firmly at the helm, swiftly and formally impeached Albright in absentia and began the process of reforming their bylaws, vowing to create a more transparent, humane, and genuinely community-focused association. They issued a formal apology to my father and established a fund to help cover his ongoing medical expenses, an initiative quickly supported by many residents. My father's recovery was slow and arduous. He underwent several more surgeries on his eye. While the doctors were able to save the eye itself, his vision in it remained profoundly impaired, a blurry world of light and shadow. The pain thankfully subsided to a manageable ache with time and medication. But the psychological scars were deep. He struggled with feelings of vulnerability, anger, and a lingering fear. My presence and the outpouring of support from his true friends and the revitalized Willows Creek community helped him immensely. He even started attending the reformed HOA meetings, his voice, though quiet, carrying a new weight of moral authority. He advocated for better protections for elderly and disabled residents, ensuring that what happened to him could never happen to anyone else. The legal proceedings against Karen Albright moved with surprising speed, largely due to the sheer volume of evidence. She faced a multi-count indictment. To avoid the spectacle of multiple lengthy trials, she would almost certainly lose, and facing the prospect of decades in prison, Albright, on Vance's advice, eventually accepted a global plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to aggravated assault with a chemical agent state charge and to several federal counts of conspiracy to distribute misbranded and adulterated drugs and wire fraud. The resolution culminated in her sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed. I was there with my father. I read a victim impact statement, my voice steady but filled with the cold fury that had simmered for months, describing not just the physical agony and permanent disability she had inflicted on my father, but the theft of his peace, his security, his trust. Prosecutors detailed her calculated cruelty and the reckless endangerment her illegal drug business had posed to countless others. The judge, a stern, experienced jurist, listened intently. In his sentencing remarks, he excoriated Albright for her depraved indifference to human suffering and her arrogant belief that she was above the law. Karen Albright was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, to be followed by a long period of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay substantial restitution to my father and to forfeit all proceeds from her illegal enterprise. Her reign of terror and deceit was definitively over. The aftermath in Willows Creek was transformative. The community, shaken from its complacency, became more engaged, more compassionate. The oppressive atmosphere fostered by Albright was replaced by a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. They even renamed the small parquet in the complex Captain's Corner in my father's honor and installed a new, properly maintained American flag, which flew proudly. For my father, life found a new normal. His vision was forever changed, a daily reminder of his ordeal. But his spirit, though battered, remained unbroken. He found new purpose in his advocacy work, his quiet determination inspiring many. He even started learning Braille, just in case, he said with a wry smile, his old Marine resilience shining through. For me, the case was a stark reminder of the intersection between my professional life and personal responsibilities. It had pushed me to my limits, but it had also reaffirmed my commitment to the FDA's mission. Protecting the vulnerable, whether from dangerous drugs or from malicious individuals wielding everyday products as weapons, was a fight worth fighting. Months later, as I watched my father patiently teaching a group of neighborhood children the basics of chess in the newly vibrant community room at Willows Creek, a sense of profound, weary peace settled over me. The scars remained for him and for our family. But out of the darkness of Karen Albright's malice, a stronger, more compassionate community had emerged, and my father, the quiet hero, was once again finding light in his world, one careful move at a time. The memory of the acrid smell of superglue would never fully fade, but it was now overlaid with the scent of blooming roses from Mrs. Henderson's unapologetically ostentatious garden and the sound of laughter, a testament to resilience, to justice, and to the enduring strength of the human spirit.